Configurable constants are like constants, except that you'll be able to change them right before you deploy the smart contract. In Solidity, this will be like an immutable variable. However, in Sway, there is no constructor. So there's no immutable variable to be initialized inside a constructor. So this is why we have configurable constants instead. To create a configurable constant, we would write configurable. And then inside here, we'll be able to declare configurable constants. For example, let's say my num of type use64. And for now, we'll initialize this to 1, 2, 3. But before we deploy the smart contract, we'll be able to change this number. We can also have a string str. Let's say str length 4 equals to fuel. Another common configurable constant might be like an address of an owner. So say owner address equals to address from, I'll just put some random B256 for the address. And we can also use structs. So let's say that we have a struct. Let's say struct point x u64 and y u64. And then inside the configurable block, we can say point is of type point equals to point. We'll say x is 1 and y is 2. So what we're going to do is, using a test framework, we're going to deploy this smart contract. Right before we deploy the smart contract, we're going to change the values inside here. And then we'll call the function test function to return these values. So I'll say here, instead of Boolean, we'll return use64 for the first configurable constant my num. Next will be str of length 4. The next one will be address. And the last one will be point. I'm going to copy this, and then next we'll actually implement the function. So say return my num. The next one will be the configurable constant str. The next one will be owner. And the last one will be point. Okay, let's try compiling this contract. I'll open my terminal and then type fork build. Okay, I have a compilation error over here, so I'll go fix this. Go back to my code and then change this to our curly braces. Okay, let's try compiling again. And our contract compiled. Okay, for the next step, I'm going to initialize a test framework using the Rust SDK. And then what we're going to do is deploy this smart contract, but right before we deploy it, we're going to change these values. And then later we'll call the function test function to check the values. For this code, the Sway version and the Rust SDK version that I'm targeting is for beta 3 testnet. To initialize the test framework, I'm going to execute this command. I got this command from the README, and I pasted the link to this code in the descriptions. And then I'll change this name from counter to config const. And then execute the command. Okay, let's open the code. So I'm going to open the file navigator and then click on harness.rs. This is our test file. The first thing that I'm going to change is the path to ABI. So if I click on the file navigator and click on out, the path to ABI is called configurable const ABI. So I'll change this to configurable const ABI. And then scroll down, and then I'll do the same over here. Configurable const.abi. Okay, let's try running the test. Open my terminal and then type cargo test. And our test passed. Let's change the configurable constant my num. Right now it's equal to 1 to 3. Let's set it to 999 and then deploy the contract. Open my harness.rs, and we need to modify the code get contract instance. Before we deploy the contract, we'll change the configurable constant and then deploy the contract. So to do that, over here, this is the code that deploys the contract. Before we deploy the contract, we'll update the configurable constant. That config is equal to my contract configurable with an S, : new. Now, where did this my contract configurables come from? Well, if we scroll up, we named our contract my contract, and here it's using a macro to generate some code. And part of this code will include a definition to my contract configurables. Then once we create this, let's say we'll set my num, so dot set my num, let's set it to 999. Okay, the next step is to actually load this configuration. So over here, load configuration default, set configurables, and then pass in the config that we created above. Scrolling down, so what we're going to do is call the function, test function, and then get the value out of it. So I'll change this to instance and then say that res is equal to instance methods test function call dot await dot unwrap, and then we'll print out the results. Print ln exclamation mark, and then inside the double quotes, curly braces, colon, question mark, comma, and then rest stop value. And then we'll run the test. Cargo test dash 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 no capture. The no capture flag tells cargo to print out the logs. Okay, and our test passed. So remember that back in our function, the first parameter that was returned is mynum, and we set this mynum to 999, which you can see over here. And then how about the log from the test? For the first output, it returns a 999. In this video, I showed you what configurable constants are in Sway, and then I also showed you how to write a test to set this configurable constant inside Rust SDK test.